Welcome to episode 3 of the B2B, the Business Club podcast. This week, we're speaking to Dionne Mallon.
Yeah, so I know Dionne through Love Brum. Met her quite recently, but it seems that we've been on a similar kind of pathway in different circles, really. Obviously, she went to the same primary school as us, which is the first I've ever heard, apart from people that we know. And yeah, she's had quite a varied life in and around sales. And we're hoping to find out more, so hope you enjoy it.
Enjoy. Welcome to B2B Business Club episode 3. This week our guest is Dionne Mallon.
Yay.
Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
Hello, thank you very much for inviting me. Truly an honour to be sat here in this stadium.
Yeah, did vigorously too.
How you doing, by the way?
Very well, very well. Yeah.
And the club's had better weekends, but away from that. So obviously you've had a very varied career to date. You do a lot. You're involved with charity, which we'll go over a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But I was wondering, could we start with the beginning? Take it back to the start of your career. West Midlands Police Force.
Ooh, okay.
So, obvious question, where did that come from? Did you always want to be a police person, a police officer, work in law enforcement, or?
Great question. So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me onto the show. So, yeah, my story began in around 1979, actually. I was aged 5 and my parents were having a play fight on the sofa. They sat there on the sofa and I was sat on the floor next to them and they were play fighting. I thought my dad was having a right go at my mum. And I just like, police, and just sort of instinctively I knew that the police could help and could help me and or my mum in that situation. And I just knew at that moment that I wanted to be a police officer to help people to avoid any kind of trouble they might be in. As it happens, it was just play fighting. They both comforted me. But from that day, really, I just had it in my head that I wanted to be a police officer. So so I lived in Allen Rock, inner city Birmingham, and there were police there was police presence, bobbies on the beat with their big top hats and blue shirts walking around. I never ever saw them as a threat. I didn't see anything bad or wrong. I just knew, yeah, that would be a good thing. So as I grew older and, growing in areas like Allen Rock, and then we moved to Ward End, which was equally as nice. Mm-hmm. And when you tell people that you want to be a police officer, one being from a sort of black community or black family, and two, from being in the community that you're in, that there's a lot of police presence for the wrong reasons. Yeah, it's quite a challenge that people still want to be your friend. But in my head, it was, I already known by that time, probably 10 years, I wanted to be a police officer. I knew that I had to stay out of trouble. I had to get certain grades at school and, just keep my nose clean. And so that's all I was focused on. I didn't care who wanted to be my friend. I didn't care about...
Was that quite polarising?
Yeah.
And especially in your teenage years?
Yeah, friends saying, well, if you ever become a copper, I'm not going to speak to you again. And they didn't. They literally stopped speaking to me the day that I joined the police. But I didn't care because, where I grew up, there was a lot of, a lot of these lads were fighting and getting themselves in all kinds of rubbish, trouble, and, the odd want to get themselves locked up. And I think some of it was down to misguidance, no fathers in the home. Some of it was down to following other friends that were doing the same kind of things, and then they'd look up to those people if they were older, and they'd want to get into the same kind of business trouble as them. And I mean, for one, if I did get myself into trouble, my dad would have whooped my backside pretty severely. But I just knew that I just had values that I just couldn't be bothered getting involved in any of that. It was just, straight down the line, wouldn't be a copper.
I touched on it earlier that there's two types of people, isn't there? There's people that see policemen driving around and on beat that feel threatened by that, feel like, and have an anxiety about it. And there's people that are like, okay, well, they're, hello, you're right.
Yeah.
How you doing? And kind of be a bit jolly about it, where Balls of Green Island Rock and stuff back in the day, people are trying to be a bit naughty, aren't they?
Yeah.
So they see the police as something that they want to be against as opposed to for. And there's two types of people.
Yeah, it's very true. And if I'm honest with you, some police don't help themselves. And that is a very, very small minority of officers that go into the force and they just come in with totally the wrong attitude. Sometimes I find, or did find from personal experience, that was because they didn't really know or understand the culture of the areas that they were working. So traditionally, if I lived in Bromford, for example, you wouldn't ordinarily be placed in the area that you grew up with.
Yeah.
They placed... But actually, I think that helped me because I understood the mindset of some of the people. I understood what it was like to come from those areas. But I remember joining the force. I joined in 93, age 19. And there was a guy that was a rocket scientist. He was upper class family, way outside of the Midlands, didn't even grow up in Birmingham. And that's not a bad thing. But for him, it wasn't a good thing because he just didn't fit in. He had no... he just couldn't correlate with the people in the area. And I think you need a degree of that. You need to be able to understand what makes people tick, to be able to not necessarily be best friends with them, because you can't, when you're policing, you can't be pally, if you like. You've got to understand that right is right, wrong is wrong. And, it's a shame when you have to lock up your friends because they've done wrong. But once you put yourself into that position as somebody outside of the community, it's very, very difficult. Yeah, you do.
Especially if you haven't got the life skills.
Yeah.
It's a life skills thing. And we've grown up, like we said, we was discussing just before, that walking to school at an early age and being able to be kind of streetwise at an early age, to be like, okay, don't talk to them, avoid them, cross over if you see them, da-da-da-da-da. Whereas a guy, I'd imagine, that's coming from that background and out the area, I suppose it's hard to imagine.
It's not as black and white as it as, right, you're either being locked up or you're not being locked up.
Yeah.
You need to ingrain within communities, don't you, for the grey areas of, you might know people are up to no good, but it's not a case of, right, let's go in heavy-handed, cuffs out. There's got to be a discussion, hasn't there?
Yeah, there has.
And it seems crazy that you would be taking people that have just come out of policing college and put them in areas that they've got no understanding of. But I
imagine police college just like, this is this in the scenario, this is this in the scenario, and then when you get out to the real world, it's like, okay.
Yeah, it's very different now to how it was when I joined. So when I joined, you had to do 10 weeks in the police training college, which was in Coventry, Brighton for us, and then you do 5 weeks out on the street. In the area that you were being posted to, so it's like familiarity between yourself and your future colleagues, and then people in the community. Yeah, absolutely, and sort of putting some of that theory into practice. And then you'd go back to Brighton, do your last 5 weeks, and then you do your passing out, have your ball, and then that's it. You're out in the community, and it's very tough, especially as a 19-year-old, as I was, kind of going into, even though I knew the community, going into such an adult job as well, because that's another facet. And I was saying to somebody the other day that actually a lot of police officers are going into the force with trauma, so then they're dealing with their own trauma, they're going in, they're seeing all of this trauma in the police through the work that they do, and then they come out severely traumatized because they've never actually dealt with the initial trauma. So there are a whole range of challenges that come with policing. And I went into the force with trauma, and then had a whole heap of trauma when I was in the force. And
I imagine that you grow up very quickly, even as a 19-year-old, even being streetwise and growing up in the community that you do. I imagine from going from that to policing in real terms.
I don't imagine it's like, okay, so we're going to start you off on petty pickpockets, and then we're going to go through. Your first day on the job, you might be having to grapple with a 15-stone bloke.
Do
you remember what your first kind of culture shock was?
Yes, I do. So I'd done my first 10 weeks in writing. I'd come out, and I think it was the first or second week that I'd come to do my 5 weeks in policing, and there was a call of what was the incident now? The incident was of a man injured on the car park of the pub, and I can't remember what the name of the pub is, but it's right by, do you know Setchford, where they used to have the fair, Bob Wilson's fair? Was it the Manor House? Was it the Manor House pub? There, and we went there, and a guy was lying on the ground. Like myself and my colleague were the first to respond, and the guy was lying on the ground, and he was just sort of had all this blood-stained foam coming from it. He'd been shot in his chest, in his torso, and obviously he was gurgling, and he'd been shot in the lung, and all this blood and foam. And what do you do? And it's chaos because there are people in and out of the pub. There's obviously been some kind of mad incident where a guy's fighting for his life on the ground. You're trying to administer first aid. You're trying to figure out if the gunman's still there. You're trying to call for backup. It's bananas, and you're 19, 20 years old, and you're thinking, okay. But, by the first 10 weeks, we hadn't really covered murder. We hadn't covered, any of that stuff. So it's you really are learning on the ground.
Yeah.
And it's a real...
As the area was, you don't really expect murder.
No. Not back then, and not there either.
Yeah.
Later on in my career, murder was, unfortunately, it was very, it was quite prevalent.
Yeah.
Because I moved to work in Aston.
Yeah.
And Nechells and Witton. There was a lot of gang violence.
Right.
Yeah, it just went.
What did you get to?
So I qualified as sergeant. So that's the next rank up. So you start off as a constable. Everybody has to do 2 years probationary to make sure that they're fit and can work on their own, and then you have the opportunity to diversify in terms of the type of work you do, and or be qualified in terms of rank. So I qualified up to sergeant, and I acted sergeant, but I didn't fully substantiate in the role because I was given the opportunity to work in intelligence later on, so I did. And it took me a couple of attempts to pass my sergeant's exam. One, because I was I wanted it, but I didn't want it. It's the mindset. I wanted it, but was I good enough? Did I know enough? All of those things that set in. Yeah, absolutely. So, but yeah, I did. And then actually I was given the opportunity to work in intelligence, so I took that because it was like dead man's shoes. It was a really tiny department. Didn't even know about the department that I worked in, but it was great experience.
What were your 2 scrapes?
One was a guy that was drunk, and my sergeant and I escorted him back to his home, say on a Friday night, for example. Oh no, it was a Saturday night actually, and then we went back to do a check on him on the Sunday morning, and he just went mad, and he was all right at first, and he was in this little bed sitting in Erdington, and then he just went mad. He just went mad in this little space, and there's me and my sergeant, and I'm quite tall. I'm nearly 6 foot, and he was throwing his furniture around. He practically barricaded us in the bed sit, and he's like, "Get out of the way from me! No, stop!" And he just kind of, it's almost like you had to impose my voice and my stature without ending up in some kind of weird fight.
Right.
Yeah.
That was just a follow-up welfare.
And that was just a follow-up welfare visit. And the other one, I was with my probationer, so I did tutor new constables coming into the force, and bless him, he's such a lovely guy. And but he looked 16. He was tall, very slender, and he looked 16. And that we were putting a parking ticket on a car that was obstructing the road in Alum Rock. And about 40 guys came and surrounded us and just give us. And, I'm there and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's going on? But we resolved that. But they were getting really anti. What are you doing this for? What are you doing this for? And you don't deserve a ticket, don't. It's just like, right, you have to talk down. And it's just...
That's the difference, isn't it? Inability to communicate.
Yeah.
Where you take a situation that is literally, the torch paper's there, ready to be lit.
Yeah.
Because there's been instances like that, hasn't there, where it has escalated not too long ago. So you have that, just being able to talk to people in that way.
Yeah.
That's massive, isn't it?
It is massive. It is a big, big skill to have. And unfortunately, You know, I've been out of the force for quite some time. It's not so easy to do that now because people recognise that there are hardly any police on the ground. Police are stretched to the max. There's no staff. There's no real backup, and so I'm not surprised that communication doesn't happen in the way that perhaps it could or should.
People taking advantage of it, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
From 2015, then you've decided to step away and pursue a new direction of career. We talk about on here the little voice or the instinct or the burn that tells you this isn't for me, I want to do something else. How did that sound or feel for you when you decided that you were going to take a change of direction in career and step away from the
Wow. So it was a bit of a long sort of road to that because it was, you know, I'd wanted to join the force as a little girl. And when I joined in 1993, the week that I joined, my mum had always been ill since I was about 9. And I had, you know, 2 siblings who are much younger than me. So there's 7 years between myself and my sister and 9 years between myself and my brother. And my dad was there, but he wasn't really there. And but she was always ill. So I was kind of the person put in charge of looking after the siblings and my mum, really. And the week that I joined in 1993 in October, all this illness, she'd been treated for something for the past, sort of the previous 6 years. And actually, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. So when I talk about going into the force with trauma, I had that hanging over my head. Yeah, it was just like, right, you know, actually, this thing that we've been treating you for, it's not that. It's cancer, and you've got 6 weeks to live. So it was a big shock. And of course, I'm in the process of being signed up to the police. And, you know, we took the decision that I was going to still continue. I'd already left home by that point anyway, but it was a real tough time. So I didn't feel like I could talk to anybody about it, you know. And so for you know, she got through those 6 weeks. You know, she lasted another 7 years, but there was a lot of chemo. There's 3 rounds of chemo. There was lots of you know, taking care of her, and sort of later on, her and my dad sort of split up. And you know, she was such a fighter. She was such a brave one. But then in 2000, she died unexpectedly on a plane on her way 30,000 feet in the air to Jamaica. So she was going back to visit her father. And I had a phone call at 2:30 in the morning to say, like, from my younger sister to say, Dionne, it's Mum, she's dead. So there was all of this crazy, don't know how to deal with it. I was in a, you know, relationship that was abusive. I had a 1-year-old son, and I was a detective at this point, dealing with some pretty gruesome stuff. So, and then I'm having to try and find my mum where she'd been taken to, and then repatriate her back to the UK. So the reason why I actually mention that is because during the 2 weeks that it took me to get her body back from America, they diverted the plane to Miami-Dade. They did the autopsy, etc., and then we had to sort of fly her back. The whole 2 weeks was, when are you coming back? We're really sorry to hear about your mum, but when are you coming back to work? And I'm in this relationship that I'm hating, and I've got a 1-year-old child, and it was just so much, but I never dealt with it, because it was, right, you're head of the family now. You've got to sort it out. So I'm the head of the family, wife, mother,
everything else.
Yeah, and it was just, so that was the very start of this sort of chain of events. And so I think it was about a year or so, it was about a year after, so 2001, I took a couple of months out and started to think maybe there's something more I could be doing in my life. So it was in a general sense. And then I went back to work, and then I took a career break for about 16 months. And that was in, I think it was 2000, I didn't get my years right now, I think it's 2003. Yeah, 2003. So by this point, I'd split up from this, my husband, as it was at the time. And I just started to look at other things I could do. But more so, it was just trying to get a bit of a breather. I just felt like I felt suffocated by the work that I was doing. Even though I loved policing, I just started to feel suffocated by it, and I didn't realise actually I wasn't dealing with the trauma that I'd had leading up to going to the police, and then my mum dying very suddenly. And so I went back into the police in 2005, had the best years of my life. It was so good, because that's when I worked with a couple of guys called Eddie and Boo, and I'd gone back in. You had to do a year back in uniform, but there was this big job that came in, and I was the only detective in this uniform role that could have managed to deal with that. So I sort of led the guys, and it was really quite time intensive, but we had the most fun.
Yeah.
And then I was sort of headhunted from there to this intelligence department, and had a really great time, but the department was really small. And then with some of the supervision and supervisory decisions that were made, stress levels started to raise amongst everybody on the crew. Some bad decisions were made, and you just kind of then started to get into the mindset, is this right? It can't be right that I'm working 21 hours in a row. It can't be right that I'm working 26 hours and then being asked to go to court. It just wasn't right. It just wasn't right. I was burning out big time. And then I have a problem with sleep occasionally. And what had happened over sort of the 4-year period, I was surviving on 2, 3, 4 hours sleep. By this time, I'd had another child. And it was just, I don't like, I talk about it now, and I think, how did I get through that?
Yeah.
But I wasn't getting through it.
Yeah.
I wasn't getting through it.
Well, even back then mental health wasn't like it is today. So
no, it wasn't.
You just like, oh, crack on, like you say.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, when you're back.
Yeah, exactly.
It's that, yeah.
Exactly.
It's that, isn't it? That whole thing, we're really sorry, but when are you back?
Yeah, for
The
sure.
but, and then anything after that, rather than just, we're really sorry, is there anything we can do?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
prevalent now, isn't it, to be like, okay, look after your mental health first, and
Yeah, for sure. So what happened then was a series of the sleep deprivation, hallucinations, and then I was like seeing my mum in the coffin, all these weird, vivid, underperforming at work, has an impact. And then it just, I dealt with this, so I was lead case builder in quite a large sort of drugs job as part of this intelligence. It's really great work in the community. But it just became, I just knew I wasn't the Dionne that I knew that had, walked into the police, a little bit, a bit traumatised, but could actually cope with stuff. And I remember going away on holiday in the August, I think it was 2013, and having just me and the children. And I went diving. I'd never been diving in my life. I'm not a great swimmer. But we were in Egypt, and the guy said, come on, come on the boat, come snorkeling. I'm thinking, oh gosh, and the kids they weren't really interested. But I said, come on, let's go and try this. So I tried a bit of snorkeling, and they said, oh, why don't you come diving? And I thought, diving? You're joking, man. I can't even keep my head above water. But and I kid you not, it was like a moment of clarity when you are underwater and you've got just a tank on your back giving you the oxygen, or else you're dead, pretty much. But the beauty under that sea in the ocean was just, I almost can't describe it, because it just gave me that clear thinking, because it was just me,
clarity.
Under the sea. Sound like Ariel now, don't I? But me under the sea, and just nothing to think about other than the octopus that was bobbing up, or
just the calm.
The ray that was there, my diving instructor, and it was just the most amazing feeling. And then I went back to work into all the chaos again. But my mindset had started to change, because I knew there was something beyond all that chaos. I knew there was some sense of calm. And so I guess in 2012, 13 was when I really started to think there was something else for me. And I guess that there was a woman that I worked with, and she'd gotten through cancer, and then her husband or partner was diagnosed with cancer, and then he ended up passing away. And she kind of played this out in front of us because we, a very tight-knit team. And I just thought, I can't, like, what do I want? What do I love? Because it's not this life. I loved policing. I didn't love the situation in which I had to police. And so it really became clear to me in 2014 that something had to give. And then my birthday was when did I leave? So I left in 2015, January of 2015. I was due to go and see a friend, go and meet them for coffee at the end of January for my birthday, and I couldn't leave the house. Just had a total breakdown, just couldn't stop crying. And they were laughing, so like, Dee Dee, like, you're the strongest person I know. What's up?
That's the first
Yeah.
You've only been so far,
Yeah.
right? That's the whole the saying, isn't it? Check on your strong friend.
Absolutely. And
The
I
voice of 5'9",
never
so no
saw
one ever asks
myself.
a strong friend how they are.
Absolutely. And he just couldn't believe it. And he said, okay, I know somebody that can, that perhaps you can talk to. He knew somebody that had used a therapist, basically.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, just give me the number. And I went off sick. Well, I was already off sick, actually, because what had happened is I was, so backtrack a little bit. The year before, 2014, I started to have like brain and like real severe headaches, couldn't see, all the hallucinations, kidney stones, kidney infection. It was just crazy. It was all stress.
It's all stress, right?
Yeah, didn't know. It was all stress. And the doctor was saying, you need to take time out. And I'm like, no. And then I had a bit of an argy-bargy with my supervisor at the time because my doctor signed me off again. I was hospitalised again. And I went back and he wanted to put me on some crazy plan. And I said, look, you know what, I can't even take this. I need to just go, do what my doctor says. And I walked out in the December. And then the January, I was due to meet my friend. And that's when I had the breakdown, really, bit of a breakthrough, I think. And then so from the January through to the July, I put every single week. I was, in fact, twice a week at first. Put myself, paid for private therapy. And Claire was the best thing that ever could have happened to me at that moment in time, because she was like, you've got a form of PTSD, it's like sort of delayed grief, you've got all this trauma, the stuff that happened in your childhood that you'd never dealt with, just kind of buried it, because he's like, keep smiling, Dee Dee, you'll be all right, just focus on your work, and all that stuff just sits down there. And then it comes up.
Until your body decides, no, I'm not
Yeah,
doing
it just
anymore.
chucks it up at you.
Did you carry that kind of from being the mother figure at home? Did you carry that into the police force?
It was a load of
You were
things.
the person everyone was relying on.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
lots to ask yourself,
Yeah,
isn't it?
and it's cultural as well. It's not just being a woman. It's your culture, because my parents never said to me, "You're gonna have it hard because you're a woman or you're black." They never said that to me, and so I never grew up with that mindset. But people outside of my family, or maybe my wider extended family, would say, "Oh, you're gonna have it really tough, as a woman." And as much as you think some of that stuff isn't seeping in, it is. And so when I went into the force, I didn't want to tell anybody about my mum's illness. I didn't want to tell anybody about, the struggles I was having in my marriage. I didn't want to say how hard I was having it looking after my children. And so, yeah, there was an element of having to prove yourself as well, because there weren't many like women in the force at that point, and there weren't many black women in the force, although I didn't really that wasn't really my focus, but there just weren't. There just weren't many, and so I didn't know how that would look to other people, and so you don't say anything. And I didn't say anything. And so, it was just, it's just a very interesting time to go through. And I look back now, and when I have these conversations, and I think, would I have said anything? I think, yeah, actually I would. Now, knowing what I know now, I would have said something.
Besides, the culture now around mental health is completely different, isn't it?
Yeah.
Say all those things that I didn't want to ask, I didn't want any help with that, I didn't want any help with that.
Yeah, for
Your
sure.
mind and body aren't stupid, are they?
Right?
You, as much as you've got the frontal thoughts of, okay, yeah, I'm fine, those quiet moments then, and like you say, your body just starts going, well, can't deal with all of this.
Yeah.
You need to just
Absolutely.
Calm yourself down.
Well, your body's run by like your subconscious, really. It's like 95% of how you operate comes consciously.
Yeah.
Stuff that you've stored, you haven't even thought about. And it's all like your views of the world and your parents' views, your parents' trauma sit within you, and you kind of develop a sense of who you are through other people and other circumstances. So when you are going through this trauma, and then you're like, okay, I'm over it now. Actually, there's a part of you that maybe thinks you're not good enough, you're not worthy. All of that sits in that subconscious, and it pops up when you're least expecting it. And that's when all of this PTSD,
Starts
it unravels, yeah.